effects of mould spores can be debilitating if left unchecked. Sydney resident Amy Stitt was impacted so badly by mould, she's ended up pursuing a career helping others avoid it. And Amy joins us now in the studio. Amy, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Now, you personally went through this, we saw in the photos just there, months of serious health issues a few years ago. What happened? Just describe that experience.
I was living in a gorgeous little apartment and over 3 years started getting symptoms ranging from itchy eyes, asthma, and then it ended up with a week of pneumonia.
Really?
And no doctors could figure out what was going on, and eventually we found out that it was mould hidden in the wall cavities.
Now, that's the trick, isn't it? Actually finding and detecting the mould, because some of it is obvious, but some of it isn't.
Yeah.
So it was hidden in the wall cavities, and but the spores were being released and impacting you terribly.
Yes, they were being released through the air vents and through the windows, and I think they were landing in the carpet, and I was forever vacuuming that carpet. That was stirring it all up, and we were breathing it in. It was going all over us, and as you could see in those photos, affecting me everywhere.
That must have taken some detective work then. I mean, were doctors curious about what was going on with you? Or?
Not so much curious, but I went doctor shopping, as I call it, and ended up with a great environmental integrated practitioner. He took one look at me and said, "I think it's mould, you need to move." And I said, "I'm not moving out of my great little rental in Sydney." And then a week later I was in hospital.
It got that bad?
Yeah, I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything for about 6 weeks.
Really? Now, you studied to become a mould testing technician, which is something we haven't heard a lot about. So you're helping other, people and finding homes, inspecting them for signs of mould. This has been a pretty busy time for you, I'd imagine.
It's very busy. I'm still studying to become a full building biologist, but I've just taken a little pause in my studies to try and help people, because my aim is to try and help people not go through what I went through, because it was a very scary time.
So with all the rain up and down the East Coast, and I mean, in some areas it's been terrible, this must be a big problem right now.
Big problem, yeah. I don't think there's one home in Sydney that doesn't have a mould issue at the moment. A lot of my clients have had existing mould and it's just been exacerbated by the weather. So that's why I'm going in and doing these assessments. And then a lot of other clients are having health issues. So they're needing to know how to remove the mould. That's the thing, we need to learn how to remove it, not kill it.
Well, that's a good question I want to talk to you about, but also what you are finding in your place, detecting it in the first place, actually finding it. Some of it's very obvious, but
yeah,
a lot
sometimes
of it
is. A lot of the times, like my situation, it wasn't, but some of the signs can be the damp, musty odour. Yeah. If you don't have any visible mould on the walls, the ceilings or anywhere, then smell. Close it up, go back in, open it, and if you've got that musty smell, that's an indication that you've got a mould issue.
So how do you get rid of it? Because it's not easy.
It's about removal, and it's about removing the source of moisture, because if it's got food and moisture, it's going to thrive. So we need to look at the whole building, from the outside, from the roof, any damage on the roof, any leaks going into the roof space. So when I go in, I look outside, I look in the roof space, in the subfloor. It's a very glamorous job.
I was going to say, yeah. You're getting into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. Crawling in through the dirt under the subfloor, and then all through the inside. I've got all different equipment, so you've got your moisture meter that's reading the moisture levels in the building materials, you've got the thermal image camera, and then we've got the sampling, which is counting what levels we've got in the air on the surfaces.
Is some so bad it needs professional cleaners to do the job?
Absolutely. Yeah. And if my clients are sick, I don't recommend that they clean it themselves or try and remove it, because it's going to exacerbate their symptoms. Yeah. Finding a good cleaner and a mould remediator can be tricky, but they're out there. It's just about asking them the right questions.
What about the health symptoms? Because there is some reluctance to acknowledge that mould causes illness, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Is that hard?
Yeah, it's really hard. But there are some really great doctors out there that are taking it on board and studying it. And that's why I want to educate everyone. That's why I've got my social media, my website. I just want to give this information out to help people, because the symptoms can be misdiagnosed. I was being put on antibiotics, steroids, all sorts of things to try and mask it, but we never found that root cause until 3 years later, and I was in a hospital bed.
So you would have to be very, very careful now going back into homes where there's excessive mould.
I do, and all of us mouldies do. We have to. That's my nickname for us.
Yeah.
We have to wear the full get-up, you know, the full Tyvek suit, the full face respirator, and there's a lot of effort that goes into it to prevent any symptoms coming back from me. But so far, so good. I think it's all working what we've been taught at college. Yeah, the Australian Environmental College has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's some people with symptoms right now who you might be answering some questions for them about, you know, what is wrong with them and why they're feeling sick.
Yeah.
And given the amount of rain and continued rain that's forecast for a long time to come, in some significant parts of Australia, mould's going to remain an issue.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So we need to look at ways to help get that moisture out of the homes, if it's through mechanical, through ventilation. It's been really hard to ventilate. It's been raining so much that you open your doors and windows and it's just coming in. So that's why in Sydney it's been really hard to buy a dehumidifier.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've just bought an air purifier as well. It's a bit of a band-aid solution, but we're in an older home and I'm working there, so I just sort of carry that around with me.
Interesting. All right, mouldy, there's a new profession. Have you heard that before?
Mould testing technician.
I like it. Well, you're an expert moulding, so I'm glad you could tell us about it. Amy, thanks for being in the studio.
Thank you very much.
Linda Fortune is a 75-year-old woman who lives in the senior living apartment complex Michael's House in Northampton. She tells Western Mass News she has been dealing with mold in her apartment for months.
I have it in that HVAC system, which needs to be, you know, really remediated by an expert. That's what I want. That's all I want.
Fortune invited Western Mass News to her one-bedroom apartment on 71 State Street in Northampton. She showed us what she believes is mold in her kitchen and HVAC system. She tells us she wrote a letter to property management 3 months ago, saying she suffers from a mold allergy, making living in a space with a certain amount of mold more harmful to her health. The Michael's House property manager responded by bringing in a mold expert to evaluate the problem.
Then she had her person come in and do tests also, but he did not go into the HVAC system at all. And what I did is I took a strip test of the HVAC and sent it to be analyzed.
Through a FOI request, we obtained copies of the Northampton Board of Health's assessment of the property. The Board of Health's inspection acknowledges Fortune's independent mold lab analysis report showed high counts for Aspergillus and Basidius spores. The department conducted its own testing, finding no significant visible fungal growth present. But at the same time, the Department of Health report says mold spore counts were slightly elevated in Fortune's bedroom. Fortune adds that her apartment's property management did provide her a new air purifier, HPA filter, and replaced the AC filters to help improve the air quality. However, she says there is still mold in the HVAC system in the kitchen that remains untreated. We reached out to property management at Fortune's apartment complex, Appleton Corporation, to see what has been done through their office. They tell us in a statement in part, quote, Michael's House meets or exceeds all codes and standards of habitability established by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We are subject to oversight from a number of jurisdictional authorities, including the Northampton Health Department and Mouse Housing. It goes on to say both of these entities have been actively involved in this matter and have been in frequent communication with the resident and our property manager. The Health Department and Mass Housing are both satisfied with our communication, follow-through, performance, and resolution to this matter. One local attorney we spoke with tells us how tenants can address mold issues.
They can file a suit in the Western Division Housing Court and seek legal advice.
Attorney Bernier also tells us that renters can reach out to the Hampton County Legal Clinic for brief counseling and legal advice for problems such as mold in their apartment that may not be getting fixed by landlords. Reporting in studio, Kristen Burnell, Western Mass News.
Mold keep appearing, something is wrong.
Carmen Powell only took off her surgical mask to do an interview with us. She says she fled her unit a week ago, staying with friends because of mold, returned yesterday to the same problem, water pouring into her unit because, she says, of bad construction work.
It's mold out there in the hallway. The people came out here Friday to cut it out. And I guess they're going to come back and finish that.
It's not just her.
It had turned the ceiling black. It had turned spots on the wall.
The building's just 2 years old, 25 apartments, lovely building inside, but the residents say when it rains, particularly on this side, it pours.
Now when it rains real hard outside, it rains hard in here.
It's a senior citizens building. Lance Coates said it was a mess yesterday.
The water's going all across my floor, pouring out of the Venetian blinds.
His home health aide cleaned it up today, but residents complain management here won't find the source of the leaks and stop them. So bad, they said, that these contractors left today asking why repair walls that will be ruined again next rain.
They looked at it and said, there's no sense in them doing anything if the water's still coming in.
We contacted Dante Properties, the owners, who say it's not a roof leak. Their contractors are now looking at the walls, still working to find it. But residents complain they've had to throw away food, furniture, clothes.
You patchwork this apartment just to get people in it, and then you're going to take advantage because we're seniors.
With the hurricane on the way, the residents here are bracing for more water, mold, and mildew. In Northeast Washington, I'm Sam Ford, ABC 7 News.
And we're going to switch gears now to something that most home buyers and home renters don't really think about when they're looking for a place to live. It not only smells bad, but can also have dire health consequences, and we're talking about mold.
That's right. It's a huge problem that remains under the radar in a lot of cases. WENY's Candace Cole talked to a woman forced out of her apartment by mold. She's here with the story. Candace?
Scott and Renata, the woman you're about to meet is on a crusade to get the word out about the dangers of living with mold. Kim Brown, who struggles with COPD, an upper respiratory disease, moved into her first-floor apartment in Elmira back in February. And when the weather started to warm up, she noticed something very troubling.
It was an awful musty smell I noticed around in May. And then it went to visibly seeing it just growing on things on my stands.
That smell was mold, and it was everywhere. Kim says she could see it coming through the paint. There was mold on her shoes, on her clothes, even on her earrings.
98% of the homes and buildings throughout our region I walk into, there's mold there somewhere. Most of the time, the homeowner and building owners have no idea that it's there.
It wasn't long before Kim's mold problem started to eat away at her health.
It attacked my respiratory to the point where I actually had coughed up blood a couple of times.
Kim says after about 4 months, her landlord finally installed 2 ceiling fans to cut down on the moisture, but that only exacerbated the problem.
But if there's a mold situation, stirring it up isn't the answer. Getting to the source of the moisture that's causing the mold to grow is the best control.
Kim's mold problem got to be so bad that her doctor ordered her to move out. She says her landlord is keeping her deposit, so she's now working to convince state leaders to provide renters protection.
This is my mission. I want renters protected by a mold law.
Our mold expert also says people need to monitor the humidity levels inside their homes, keeping it under 50%. So make no mistake, if humidity levels are over 50%, for more than 48 hours, mold will grow. In the studio, Candace Cole, WENY News.
It is growing up my daughter's windows, the windowsill. We have found it, and we have a 20-month-old son. It was growing in his closet and along his windowsill.
Jessie Seidel tells me she's lived at the Quail Ridge Highlands Apartments for 2 years. But it wasn't until this year she said the issue started getting really bad.
My son has constantly had an upper respiratory infection. We've not been able to keep him well. He's been hospitalized for RSV, which can be a side effect from the mold.
Seidel's family is not alone. We spoke to 2 other families by phone who say they and their children have had serious health issues too.
2 of them's children have been diagnosed with asthma, and there's no asthma in the family. Pediatricians are telling us to get our kids out of these environments.
The residents we spoke to and property managers disagree on when management was notified of the problem. We contacted the corporate office, who said they weren't notified until recently and weren't allowed inside the apartments to check it out. Residents told us management knew about the problem for months and didn't fix it, so they hired their own mold company to do a test. This is what came back.
There is substance alongside the windows. What we know, we've tested it in several of the apartments, 3 of them. and it came back positive for penicillin aspergillus and Stachybotrys, more commonly known as black mold.
Bartlett code enforcement stepped in, declaring all 3 units unlivable. Reps from the complex's corporate office tell us they hired a mold remediation company to help with the affected units and to see if there's a bigger problem. But these families have this warning for others about this silent danger.
I want them to know what the health risks can be. I want them to also know that just because your apartment manager tells you that it's mildew growing in your walls, you might want to second guess it, because ours is not just mildew, it's mold.
So a bit of advice right now if you're eating dinner, maybe to put the fork down for just a second. An Aurora man tells Contact 7 a water leak has caused all sorts of disgusting problems in his apartment.
And that includes mushrooms growing out of his carpet. Our Lance Hernandez went to the complex to get some answers.
The wet carpet squishing under Sean Reese's shoes. Reese says the carpet has been damp or squishy since March. That's when he first noticed these mushrooms growing at the base of his dining room wall.
I didn't know what it was at first. I was scared to touch. I thought it was I thought it was like some kind of bug or something. I didn't want to touch it.
Reese says maintenance crews removed the shrooms and cleaned the carpet, but the problem didn't go away. The 34-year-old says his asthma started acting up. He can't help but wonder if there's mold behind these walls.
I'm a kidney patient. I had a kidney transplant. My immune system is compromised, so I'm not supposed to be around this stuff. I've been sick every day since I've been here.
He called the city, which sent code enforcement officers out this morning. Code enforcement ordered management to remove the excess water, repair and replace damaged drywall, clean and remove all mold and mildew, and start treating the unit for a roach infestation.
So we'll be checking back with you in a week to make sure this stuff was completed. If they don't complete it within the 7 days or have the pest control out in 7 days, they get a fail, and then they get a 10-day final notice before they're served a summons to court.
We checked with Reese's neighbor on the other side of the dining room wall. He said his carpet is soaked too. He said his problem started during the last hailstorm a couple weeks ago. We reached out to BLDG management and are still waiting to hear back. Lance Hernandez, Denver 7.
Oh, good grief.
A mold-infested apartment. A woman on the city's northeast side thinks her apartment may be responsible for sending her to the emergency room. And she spoke to the Night Team's Corey Smith about the danger she believes is lurking behind her walls.
Danielle Henriksen isn't breathing easy these days. She's not sleeping very well either, and she says it all has to do with the nightmare she found behind her bedroom wall. It all started with a water leak.
The wall, you could literally lean on it like that and it would creak, and it had a definitive line where it was breaking.
A maintenance man removed the sheetrock, exposing this dark and dingy site. What was supposed to be pink insulation had turned an awful shade of brown, black, and gray.
When I saw that, I knew.
Danielle says it was mold.
I was shocked because our bed's right here, so we literally sleep next to it.
But the managing company disagreed. In a statement, they said, quote, it was observed there was discoloration on the insulation and exterior sheathing from age and 40-plus years of Texas weather, but no active mold was found. That conclusion was based solely on the observation of management, as no mold detection tests were conducted.
Danielle was so concerned that she went out and bought 2 homemade mold tests. Both of them appear to be positive, but when she took them to the leasing office, she was told there wasn't a problem.
Tonight, the management company says it's our understanding that an over-the-counter mold test was performed by the resident, which indicated a presence of mold. Our concerns are that only a licensed technician can confirm any findings of mold, as well as the guarantee that proper protocols were followed performing the test. But Danielle says these pictures and her recent trip to the ER for an upper respiratory infection tell a different story.
I'd say just fix it. Fix it or move me out.
Latasha Arnold is a single mom doing the best she can to provide for her 2 kids. But these days, she's feeling defeated.
I haven't felt comfortable for a while.
Mold is spreading throughout her unit at Madison Chase Apartments. Through the vents, the AC closet, and even the floor.
We've all had respiratory issues, sinus infections.
She says it's been a problem ever since she moved in 2 years ago. And since then, her 3-year-old daughter has been in and out of the doctor's office with respiratory problems.
They should be relocating us to a unit that's not affected or paying for us to be somewhere else. They are denying it.
She says instead of fixing the problem, management just covered it up, literally.
They finally came in this past week and spray painted over the molds to hide it.
She had a professional do a mold test, and the results are alarming.
You're lying in toxic stuff.
They found high levels of mold in the master bedroom, her daughter's room, and a sea closet. Howard Newmark, a mold remediation contractor, looked at the results. He said that level of mold is definitely not normal. And Dr. Adam Welikoff at the Pulmonary Critical Care Sleep Disorders Institute of South Florida told us it can definitely be harmful.
Like inflammation in the lungs, even progressing to respiratory failure. Although fortunately that is by far the less common. So you can get rashes, you can get itchy spots, you can get dry skin, any kind of those things that people usually associate with allergies.
I don't know what they're going to do, but I don't think it's right for all these families with children to be living in a toxic environment.
Latasha just wants the problem fixed because she can't afford to move.
It's hard for me to have a savings and to get 3 months rent.
Patrick, Marie Hughes, and her sons are all living with various disabilities, and Marie tells me that her doctors are telling her that she has to get out because of her income. That simply isn't an option, but she's saying that her health is actually at risk. Moldy ceilings and carpet.
Started with a water leak in my son's bedroom.
And crumbling walls.
Plain as day, you could see it.
That's what Marie Hughes has been living with at her apartment at the Lago del Sol complex in Fort Myers. Marie and both her sons are living with disabilities.
Whenever it rains, it's really scary because that's when it would really soak the carpet.
She says it's hard for her son who has asthma to breathe.
It has affected him. He's had to use his rescue inhaler so much more than he used to.
Marie says she's tried for 9 months to get the landlord to fix the problems in her apartment, but nothing has helped. She started making complaints when the mold first appeared, but nothing was done. Here are various letters she's written to her building management company. Her sister Myra helped her through it.
I have to keep the phone on all the time because I'm concerned about an emergency with them living here.
Myra says she's done everything she can to help her sister, like contacting the management company and her landlord.
And he told me that he really cared about what was going on with my sister.
When nothing was done, she called the County Department of Health. Inspectors posted this sign on the door in October, requiring fixes to be made in 60 days. But Myra says nothing's changed.
For my sister and her nephews to be mistreated this way, it just shouldn't be.
The CBS 13 News at 10 continues.
Well, they thought it was COVID, but a local family now believes they actually got sick from mold growing in their rental home, and they're not alone. So what are your rights if your life is turned upside down by mold?
CBS 13's Julie Watts is getting answers.
Yeah, guys, mold is a complicated one. Part of the problem is there are no state or federal exposure limits, so it's difficult to prove when mold is actually a health threat. But one thing is clear. California law requires landlords provide a safe and healthy home.
It's all about survival when you're in the wild, right?
Camping out with the family may seem like fun, but for the Crenshaws, they say it was anything but.
This is day 2.
Their saga began over the holidays when Carl and his wife thought they had COVID. Then they discovered the mold.
We thought we had COVID.
You now think it was mold symptoms?
No, we know it is now.
They say their symptoms got so bad they moved their family of 7 into a tent in the yard as they waited for their landlord to remediate the mold. When the contractor finally came, Carl took this video of the contractors who he says simply scraped and painted over the mold without removing their belongings to prevent contamination or removing the contaminated drywall to treat inside the source of the mold.
So you're not removing no wall, it's clean? Yeah, yes, clean.
Real estate attorney Joe Tobner does not represent the Crenshaws, but says when a tenant notifies a landlord of mold in writing, they must properly remediate the mold.
It's really typical for us to find negligence in mold cases because to do it the right way is expensive.
While California law doesn't require a specific protocol, Tobner says they should move the tenants and their belongings out, have contaminated items cleaned off-site, treat the source of the water intrusion, remove contaminated drywall, treat the interior of the walls, then retest for mold.
Anything outside of that protocol is going to give rise to liability.
Tobner says in some cases a lawyer may be your only option. They can sue your landlord to cover monetary damages and emotional distress and even the cost of a rent increase if you have to move. But he says health claims can be tricky.
You need the allergy test showing that you're allergic to the very mold that was found in the unit.
The Crenshaws paid for multiple mold tests.
So we were breathing this stuff in.
Crenshaw's landlords, Arbors at Antelope, would not tell us whether they had the unit independently tested, but said in a statement, "We take matters like this very seriously and scheduled initial remediation as quickly as possible." Those repairs were performed and completed by a licensed contractor. Now, California Health and Safety Code requires property owners provide a rental unit that is safe and healthy. If a property owner does not respond to mold concerns, a local code enforcement agency can require the property owner to correct the problem.
But look, it's growing back.
Carl called code enforcement back in January, but the landlord still hadn't completed the work when we visited in March.
This is what they call repairs. They were going to just cover it up and try to move us back in.
Code enforcement tells us they finally signed off in April after additional work was done, but says they're only required to address visible mold, so they don't test the air or address hidden mold that may be growing inside the walls. We spoke with some of Crenshaw's neighbors who tell similar stories of mold. An attorney representing 86 tenants with mold complaints in this complex tells us several have young children.
The research is really clear that kids that live in uninhabitable conditions are going to have long-term health impacts.
So why not just move? Well, several renters tell us they either can't afford high rents right now or don't have money for deposits, applications, or movers. Others say their applications are being denied as more landlords require high credit scores and incomes.
My baby's toys.
Meanwhile, the Crenshaws say they had to send most of their belongings to the dump.
Brand new mattresses.
They're now staying in temporary housing while they struggle to find a new permanent, mold-free home that they can afford.
Welcome back. A woman in Cordell claims she is just now getting better after being exposed to toxic mold where she works.
She's afraid that her employer is ignoring her concerns, too. News 9's Carl Torp joins us from Cordell with the story.
That woman is a nurse here at the Cordell Christian Home, a nursing home. Now, it says it doesn't have a mold problem, but she claims that she's got pictures that prove otherwise.
I cannot stand to be inside the building.
Because of this, says nurse Angela Harris. She claims she took the pictures here at the Cordell Christian Home. They appear to show mold, which Harris says is making her sick.
I have a lot of gastrointestinal issues that mimic irritable bowel syndrome. I have a chronic cough.
Harris tells us she got more information on her health from an ear, nose, and throat doctor in Midwest City.
He told me that the symptoms that I was having, the immediate reaction symptoms and the long-term symptoms, were symptoms related to toxic mold exposure and toxic mold toxicity.
The registered nurse says she started telling maintenance crews at the facility her concerns 3 months ago and confronted administrators about it a few weeks ago when nothing was done.
They have yet to have a professional into the building.
Instead, Cordell Christian Home told News 9 they themselves cleaned their heating and air ducts, which was sufficient with OSHA standards. They also claimed that a test proved this wasn't mold, but dust or dirt. The nursing home would not go on camera or provide documentation that a proper test was ever performed.
They lack concern on this issue.
Harris left work in mid-December, but wants to return to caring for the 60 or so elderly residents. However, not until a professional walks through the door with a clearer answer of what this is and the hazard it may pose.
If they don't want to test the air quality in the building for me, at least do it for the residents.
In Cordell.